Okay, so I'm going to start by just mentioning a little bit about the phonics screening test, which, as you know, was cancelled in the summer for year 1. And for this year only, it is required that schools administer a past version of the phonics screening check to all year 2 pupils during the second half of the autumn term, and those results will be returned to the local authority. It is a past version of the test, so it's not quite as serious as the test would have been, but it does give us a really good guide onto who would have passed and where to take their phonics next. If they don't meet the expected standard, they will get another chance in June next year alongside the year 1 pupils. So it will be delivered in probably November, and we will send those results off. If your child is not yet at the expected standard, don't panic. They will be able to get another chance in June. So I'm going to talk to you now a little bit about the SATs, which is always a sort of a horrible topic, really, for many people. But actually, it's once you know what it's all about, it's nothing to worry about. They have to complete assessments in writing, reading, and maths, and those results are reported to the LEA and are recorded nationally. So it's important that you're aware of the importance of these tests. So they will take assessments in reading and maths. There is also an optional grammar, punctuation and spelling assessment, which we may also do. We don't have to, but it's quite useful to inform our teacher assessment in writing, and in addition to all the writing that they do. And they will all take place in May next year. There's no specific date. So obviously children really need to be in school. No holidays booked in May, please. So we try and take it slowly with them and give them plenty of rest and breaks throughout that month. Science is teacher assessed, and I've already been starting that assessment in year 1. The tests are all marked internally, and then everything's moderated. But the overall judgment is still teacher assessment, which is really good news. So in maths, they will sit 2 tests, so paper 1 and paper 2. Paper 1 arithmetic is approximately 20 minutes, but if they need longer, that's absolutely fine, and some children complete it extremely quickly. So it's very flexible, and it's all just calculation methods. There's no reasoning in there. It's all just very bog standard, what we would sort of mental maths stuff, that they can draw pictures to help them. They can do column method, which we would have covered by then. It's up to them how they show their working. And the second paper is a little bit more tricky in that they have to do lots of reasoning skills, but we will be practicing that. We've already started practicing our reasoning a lot, so it's a bit more complex, but that's what we work towards, and that shows really their maths mastery. And they get used to explaining their working out as we go through the year, so they're ready for that. So there's 3 levels that children are assessed at. The first is working towards the standard level, so it's not quite at the expected, but it's working towards, and it's not unusual for children to be at this level. It's nothing to worry about. If your child comes out at working towards, it simply highlights the gaps in their learning which need to be covered the following year. So to working towards, they need to be able to count in 2s, 5s and 10s. They need to be able to read and write numbers to 100, and they need to understand the value of coins, which is something children are not as good at these days, simply because they don't handle as much money for some reason. So that's something that we're working on a lot. Partitioning of numbers into 10s and 1s, as you've all seen on Tapestry, that we've been focusing a lot on that, and it's a really important skill for them. They need to know some of their number bonds to 10. Most children in our class know their bonds to 10, so that's pretty much covered, and know their shapes. This isn't everything they need to know, but it's the basis of it. It's the crux of it, basically. The next standard, which is expected standard, they need to know all of that previous standard before they can be deemed to be at the expected standard. So they will need to do all of that, and then it moves on to being able to add 2 two-digit numbers which includes crossing the tens, which is fairly problematic for some children, which is why we learn to write out the tens and ones, and then they simply add those together. We will be learning the column method as well. Some children that's really useful, for others it's not, so there'll be more than one way of learning how to do that. They need to be able to read the time, another tricky thing for children at the moment, generally, nationally, telling the time to the nearest 15 minutes. Reading scales of all sorts of different types of scales, so doing lots of cooking and things is really helpful for that, and taking temperatures and thermometer work. Finding fractions of shapes and numbers, so half, a quarter, a third of a shape or a number. They need to know multiplication and division facts for 2, 5 and 10. So many children are already very skilled at that. Learning their times tables has really helped over lockdown for some of them. Subtracting a 2-digit number from another 2-digit number, again, including crossing the tens, such as 62 take away 28, can be very problematic. And again, many methods will be taught, and the child, will choose their favourite method, and they should be able to work it out. It's just lots of practice, really. It's important that children at home use the methods we use in school. So that's why we'll be putting lots of things up on Tapestry, and if you can have a look to see how we do it, that helps them to be consistent. Some children will be working at greater depth, in which case they'll be able to tell the time to 5-minute intervals, and they'll be able to explain their reasoning to solve complex problems, 2-step problems. So many children are happy to explain a 1-step problem, but taking it another step further obviously requires a bit more complex thought and practice, and being able to talk about it as well is really important. Describing similarities and differences of shapes, so comparing them. So we'll be using all that terminology, so vertices and faces and edges comes into play there, so they can make comparisons. So there's a lot there. But we're working on many of those things already. So by the time the SATs comes, they'll be well briefed. So I've just put a few ideas down how to help your child with maths at home. So playing times table games is really good for fluency, and just encourage them to explain how they know that 5 5 is 25. How do they know that, rather than just remembering. Mental math games, counting in different amounts, forwards and backwards. Backwards is always very tricky for them, needs a lot of practice. Any opportunity at all for telling the time, even the most simple basic times, is really important. They get an idea of what happens when. So when do they have their lunch? What time do they have lunch? What time do they have a story? What time do they go out? And just point to the clock when you think it's a good time, 1/2 or 1/4 and ask if they can tell you that time. Counting money, really can't emphasize enough how important counting money is, coins and knowing the different shapes, and sorting money and getting change as well, which is really helpful for them. It takes a lot of effort for a lot of them to understand the money, and obviously with everything else we can't practice it every single day in school, but so at home would be really useful. I'm looking for numbers on street signs, car registrations, anywhere you see a number, particularly 2 digits and 3 digits even, can they tell you what those numbers are? 2D shapes and 3D shapes just around the home is a really nice way of learning about shapes, things in the kitchen cupboard, boxes and packets, what sorts of shapes have they got in there. Identifying, weighing or measuring quantities and amounts in the kitchen or in recipes, so helping with cooking and making recipes is always really useful, making Play-Doh, that sort of thing. And playing games involving numbers or logic, such as dominoes, card games, drafts or chess, is a really good way of honing in those skills and getting them to talk about what they're thinking. So we come to reading now. The reading test is again 2 separate papers, and paper 1 consists of a combined reading prompt and answer booklet, so they're all in one document. The paper includes a list of useful words and some practice questions for teachers to use to introduce the context and question types to pupils. The test takes approximately 30 minutes, but again, it's not timed. If they need more time, that's fine, and if they finish early, that's fine as well. So it's not a strict timing. The practice questions are really useful, and we will have done many practice things in advance of that as well, so they'll be used to the format. The difference between paper 1 and paper 2 is that paper 2 has an answer booklet and a separate reading booklet, which can be really problematic for children in terms of organising where they are on the page. So again, we will be practicing this before the time. There are no practice questions for this paper. If children really not doing well and they're getting distressed, we'll just simply stop that child where they've got to. The important paper is paper 1. Paper 2 is an extension, and children will all have the opportunity to take it, but if it's causing them any anxiety or stress, we will stop the test early, and that's about 40 minutes, but again, if they need longer, that's fine. And there will be a range. It could be poetry, fiction and non-fiction. So again, this is why it's really important to expose children to a variety of texts, not just storybooks. So that's the reading test. In my experience, children actually quite enjoy doing the reading as long as they're prepared well and they're used to answering questions about what they're reading. So working towards the standard for reading. So this is slightly below where we would expect them to be at the end of year 2. So with support, they can answer questions and make inferences. So with your support or teacher support, read many common exception words. So reading them is vital for them to encourage fluency, because obviously they can't use their phonics to work them out. So they need to be recognizing those words. And obviously that helps them to understand what they're reading. Accurately blend common graphemes. So they really need to be blending with all the graphemes that they've learned, all the digraphs and trigraphs and split digraphs. Need to be really familiar with that. And read aloud many words quickly and accurately without overt sounding and blending. Now, some children are still sounding out as they go, which is absolutely fine at this stage. So we need to help them when we're reading with them, whether it's at school or at home, to encourage them to read. If they know the word, read it. They don't have to sound out every single word. So if they know the word, they just read it. There are other things on there, but those are the most important things. To be at the expected standard, they need to be able to read fluently and accurately without too much sounding and blending. And this is deemed to be around 90 words per minute. Obviously, that's quite a strict measurement. Some children can read much faster than that per minute, and some children will read slower, but it's still fast enough and fluent enough to be able to understand what they're reading. So it's really making sure they're understanding what they're reading. They're not reading so slowly they lose the gist, and they're not reading too quickly that they're not taking it in. So they have to check if they read a sentence and it doesn't make sense. They need to be thinking, does that sentence make sense? Some children tend to read without thinking about what they're reading about. So if they're checking it makes sense, that's a really good sign that they're taking it in as they read. They need to read most common exception words and answer questions and make some inferences. So some children find it a bit difficult to infer. So if the answer to what you're asking them is not on the page, and you're simply asking them to say, how do you think she feels, or how would you feel about that, or how do you think your mum would feel about that, that's obviously more difficult for them, and they need to be able to infer a character's feelings, which can be quite tricky for them. Some children will be working at greater depth. They'll be making links between the books they are reading and other books. So it could be that they think, or they're reading some Roald Dahl books, and how are they similar or different to David Walliams' books, or another author, Dickens Smith. So they're making links between books and authors. It might be that they're reading a book. At the moment, we're reading Patin's Pumpkin, and many of them have made the link between that and Noah's Ark, the story of Noah's Ark. So they've identified a link, that the flooding is the link between those books. So it could be a link between authors, or it could be a link between books. At greater depth, they need to be able to predict what might happen next based on what has happened so far. So plausible predictions, and give reasoning for those predictions. and making inferences, quite in-depth inferences, and explain reasons why. So there's only a few extras for working at greater depth, but it's quite a significant difference in their understanding. A little bit about reading fluency. Fluency is decoding quickly and automatically, not having to stop at words to sound out, reading with speed, accuracy and expression. In order to understand what they read, children need to read fluently, and this bridges a gap between the word recognition and comprehension. Many children find this quite a difficult gap to bridge sometimes, but getting the word recognition is obviously really, really important, and then we come on to the comprehension. So sometimes where children have stayed on the same level of book for a long time, it's not necessarily that they can't read the book, they can't decode it, but it may be that they find it difficult to understand and to comprehend. So sometimes we don't like to move them on too fast, because this can cause a lot of problems later down the line. So fluency is really important for comprehension, and the two need to go together. So with reading, there's all sorts of ways, and all of you are amazing with your children and read very frequently with them, but I just thought I'd run through a few more reminders. So it's all about enjoyment and a love of reading, and sadly it seems to be dwindling a little bit in children at the moment, and it's for obvious reasons. You know, screens are far more instant and easier, but books are so important, and it's finding books and a type of book that they love is really important. So enjoying stories together, so not only hearing your child read, but obviously reading to your child is so important. They need to hear the intonation in your voice, how you interpret the punctuation. So when you get to question marks, exclamation marks, full stops, commas, they need to hear that in order to be able to copy that. And so modelling from you is really important. So when you read with your child, it's really important that they don't sit there for ages. So, you know, little and often, rather than, you know, once a week for half an hour, it's not going to go down well. So little and often with reading is always very beneficial. Talk about the story, what happened before, what happened during and afterwards. Discuss the plot, the characters, anything you can think of that's not actually written in text. How else could you challenge them to talk to you about the story and feelings of the characters? You know, how does it make them feel? Predict what will happen, and encourage your child to have their own opinions. Let them have an opinion that's different to yours, or it's a bit unusual. If they can justify it and reason about it, then that's fine. Look up words together, definitions, what do things mean? You could use a dictionary, internet, obviously reminding them about internet safety, or an app on a phone or a tablet. It doesn't really matter how you do it, but I mean, for example, today we're trying to find other words for words like very, and they found that really difficult. So it's just trying to build up a bank of alternative words. So that's always a really good game to play. If they finish their book really quickly, or you think, oh, that was a bit easy, try and challenge them with a word definitions game. So yeah, all reading is valuable. It doesn't have to just be stories. It can involve anything from fiction and non-fiction, poetry, newspapers, magazines, football programs, TV guides. Visit the local library if and when it ever opens. I don't know if it's open yet, mine isn't, but when it does, yeah, that's a really great place to go. So spelling, punctuation and grammar, this is optional for all Year 2 classes, but we will probably still administer this assessment in order to inform our teacher assessed writing judgments. It's not definite. We will decide near the time if we will administer that if it's necessary. So there's spelling. They spell 20 missing words within a test booklet. The test is expected to take about 15 minutes, but again, it's not strictly timed. Paper 2 is grammar, punctuation and vocabulary. We actually call it SPAG, so spelling, punctuation and grammar, same thing. A combined question and answer booklet focusing on pupils' knowledge of grammar, punctuation and vocabulary. Pupils will have approximately 20 minutes to complete the questions, but again, it's not strictly timed. So it's really useful for us for teacher assessment, but we do actually monitor this on a weekly basis in class anyway. But it may be that they sit the test, or we decide it might not be necessary. I've written a list of terminologies that pupils need to understand. So maybe you can point out some of those in reading as well. So you've got noun, a noun phrase, which is simply, you know, a black dog, a pink pig, rather than just a pig or a dog. So giving it a describing word. A statement, so they have to learn statements, questions, exclamation and command sentences, 4 different types of sentences, and we will be covering that. We haven't covered that yet, but that will be covered, and they will be practicing that a lot. Identifying the different types of sentences is another thing you could perhaps do with them when they're reading. So they need to understand the word compound, so we've begun to talk about compound words in class. Adjectives, verbs, suffixes, which we covered a little bit today. Again, tricky words for them to be digesting, really. Adverb, tense. We've been talking about past and present tense. So again, perhaps another way you can identify that in their reading. Is it in the past or is it in the present? How do they know? Apostrophe and comma. Lots of things we cover regularly when we're reading with them, and we're starting to bring that into their writing. So in writing, there's no formal tests, but termly assessed writing will be carried out to inform the children's next steps. All teacher assessment is based on classwork and independent writing tasks. Towards the end of year 2, obviously they get more and more opportunities to write about different things. So things that have happened to them. So when we go on school trips, they'll be writing about school trips. They'll be writing about science experiments, stories. So it's really varied. In writing, working towards the standard, so just below where we would expect them to be at the end, they need to be using full stops and capitals in some sentences, so not all sentences, spelling some common exception words, forming tall and small letters in the correct direction and of relative size to one another in some of their work. So you notice the word some in here for working towards. So as long as we're seeing it sometimes, that's them working towards. If it's all the time, then they're most likely at the expected standard. They need to use spaces between words, and they need to be using their phonics to spell words. If their spellings are not phonetically plausible, then they need to be finding more opportunity to use their phonics and to practice that skill. If they're at the expected standard, we would expect to see accurate punctuation for most sentences, so capital letters, finger spaces, full stops, question marks if it's a question, exclamation marks if it's relevant, so really understanding the sorts of sentences they're writing. They need to be using the consistent use of the correct tense, so staying in the past tense as they write, or staying in the present tense. Using coordination, so using but or and some subordination when, if, that and because to join their clauses. We started using but or and we'll be later focusing more on the subordination. They need to be able to spell many common exception words accurately. That's not all of them, but that's many of them, and they'll be sent home those termly. I believe you've all had your common exception words for this term, and we're practicing on a weekly basis in class, and they're all doing very well. They need to be forming their letters of the correct size. So capital letters and long letters are taller, and the rest are half a line size. This is tricky for all children. As the lines get smaller, they have to obviously concentrate more, and that if their writing is not of the correct size, with long letters tall, with capital letters the same size, and the rest, if all their letters are the same size, it's deemed to be working towards. So it's a really important part of their expected standard that we have to practice a lot. And you might hear your child saying, Mrs. Warburton says my writing's too big. Well, it may be that we've said that all their letters are a little bit all the same size. They're all big. So we need some big ones and some small ones. And then they'll be at the expected standard. Working at greater depth. So this is pretty tricky to get to greater depth in writing, but it is possible. Every year we get a few children, but we're really expecting the expected standard mostly, but those who are working at greater depth are using the full range of punctuation mostly accurately. So they're using commas as well, commas in a list, and apostrophes for both possession and contractions. Now, this is something we haven't covered yet in class in writing. We talk about it a lot whenever we see it in their reading. So if they're reading apostrophes, we ask them what letter it might have knocked out, or why is there an apostrophe. Again, so if you can bring that in, that would be really useful. It's a tricky one. Using some joins in their handwriting. Most of them will be joining their handwriting this year, so that's not a problem. Spelling most common exception words correctly, so it still says most, but it's more than some and many, so you've got most. Suffixes to spell most words correctly. This is something that comes with obviously better reading, comes with better writing, because they see it written down more. So you've got sort of enjoyment and all that sort of thing to add to the end of their words, and giving them a chance to extend their language is really important. And again, they get most of that from reading. So in their writing, it needs to be seen at greater depth that they're making additions, revisions, and they are proofreading corrections to their own writing. So it's good to be seen to be making additions. So if there's a piece of writing in their book that hasn't been added to or revised and proofread with some extra words in there, that will be expected standards. So we'll get to the stage when they start to edit their work to improve it and to make their own corrections. And the vocabulary is significantly different for greater depth, so they need to be making interesting word choices, upscaling using a thesaurus. So we'll be helping those children that are ready to do that in order to enhance their vocabulary. So how to help your child with writing? So again, practice and learn with, well, it says weekly, but we do termly spelling lists. Okay, we do them weekly in school, but your list won't change until the next term. So we are practicing and learning those in class every week, and try and make it as fun as possible. It doesn't have to be a boring exercise. They really enjoy doing it in school on the whiteboards or on different coloured pens and that sort of thing. Encourage opportunities for writing, such as letters to family or friends, shopping lists, notes or reminders, stories and poems, songs. A lot of the children write songs in golden time, so if they want to write you a song, lovely, let them get on with it. Write together, so let them see you writing. Be a good role model for writing, and that again goes for reading as well. So be a good role model for both reading and writing. Encourage the use of a dictionary to check spelling. You know, the children's dictionaries are pretty good, and it's once they know how to use a dictionary, it really opens up a lot of opportunities for them. Allow your child to use a computer for word processing, which will allow for editing and correcting of errors without lots of crossing out. So sometimes for them that can be useful, and then they can see how that might be done in their own work at school and at home. So remember that good readers become good writers. Identify good writing features when reading. So good vocabulary, interesting vocabulary, sentence structure, punctuation. And what we are really looking for in writing is that children have a really significantly good writer's voice. So that means when you're reading their writing, you can hear a voice talking to you. It's like somebody's talking to you, and that's how they try and get their writing to the next level, really. They pass it on to somebody else in the class. Can they read it? Can they understand it? And can they hear that writer's voice? So show your appreciation, praise and encourage, even for small successes. So important that they want to please you with their writing and to write more. So the assessment framework is that to demonstrate that pupils have met a standard, teachers will need to have evidence that a pupil demonstrates consistent attainment of all the statements within the standard and all the statements in any preceding standard. So that means in order to be at the expected, they have to tick off everything in the working towards. And to be at the greater depth, they have to tick off everything in the working towards, everything in the expected, and to be able to move on to the greater depth. So they may be doing some greater depth elements, but if they haven't, still not remembering to do finger spaces, then that goes all the way back down to the working towards. So it's quite a tight framework, but we're very confident that children understand their expectations and they all have their next steps to work towards. in maths, reading and writing, and we will also look at the work which children complete in class every week to help us make our judgments. So it's not just based on one day, and most of it is classwork. It's just to support our own judgments that we've already made. So how to help your child. Okay, this is about how to help your child when they come to take the SAT. So things like that, it's nothing to worry about, and it's nothing for you to worry about either, parents. It's all under control in school. Lots of praise and encouragement, and they shouldn't be afraid of making mistakes. So that's what helps them to get better at things. But please ensure your child has the best possible attendance at school. That's really crucial, because every day we do cover quite a lot, and if there's a gap we can't go back on it, and it's just a gap, and hopefully they'll catch that up later if possible. Support your child with any homework tasks that they have. Reading, spelling and arithmetic, for example, times tables are always good to practice, and spellings obviously whenever you can, and if you get them to write them in a sentence, that's really helpful as well. Talk to them about what they've learned at school and what books they're reading, what about the characters, the plots, and whether they like those books or not. And really do make sure your child has a good sleep and healthy breakfast every morning. It makes such a difference. I know sometimes it's a bit difficult when we're all rushing off to work, but it is important, and they really do benefit from it. Okay, so the results of the SATs will be reported to the LEA, and an overall result will be made available with the yearly report. So you will find out the result of your child's test. Finally, thank you for attending, and that's heartfelt thanks really from both of us, because it's so important to have parental support. We couldn't do it without you, and over lockdown particularly, everyone's really made a huge effort, and that's really helped them come back into school much stronger than it would have been otherwise. So thank you very much for your support in this. There are some test examples available to browse through at the end of this PowerPoint when it gets put up.
Yeah, we will upload the PowerPoint to the website, or there'll be a link to the PowerPoint, so you'll be able to have a look through, and we've recorded it as well, so if you want to go back and listen to anything again, you can do. So if we come off of our, because what we couldn't see was parents. That's better.
There.
So let's see.
You all still awake?
Okay. So did anyone have any questions or anything they would like to ask? I can see Evan's mum, yes. Would you want to unmute yourself, Faye, and answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, with regards to learning to tell the time, are they allowed to wear watches to school, or are they not?
That's a wonderful question. I think as long as they're not, a kind of heavy watch that could get broken, then it's absolutely fine, I think, in year 2 that they've got a watch.
And the watch preferably should be analog, not digital, because it's the analog they struggle with. So a classic old Timex watch would be perfect. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? Oh, we've got lots of people now.
Okay.
Hang on a minute.
Okay.
So who have we got? We've got Mary. Would you like to ask your question, Mary?
Sorry, Tenny is making noise. Yeah, just with regards to the reasoning assessment, would that be verbal or non-verbal reasoning? Or both?
Reasoning. The reasoning is within the maths. Is that what you mean? So there's no verbal reasoning. It's not. We have the reading paper is comprehension, and then you have the spelling, the grammar, and the punctuation. So the reasoning that I've been talking about is the reasoning their ideas in maths. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. And then we've got, we've got one more hand raised here. Let's see if we can find this one. Just trying to find your name. There's one more hand. If you raised your hand, would you like to just unmute yourself and ask
Yes,
your
yes,
question?
I'm Afiq Dad.
That must be you, yes.
Okay, that, I think there's a few people, that's why you're picking someone. So that's why I'm just waiting to get your permission to start. Okay. Anyway, so so I got lots of guidance from your presentations, and really is good for the children. This is a good guidance for us to just kind of helping children to improve their skill, like basically. But is it possible to have any hard copy or kind of we need kind of thing like that? But or I had some record, or I just made some note already, but I think I miss a lot of things like that. So really useful for us if you have any hard copy or the copy of the presentation. I can just helping with the children. Is it possible to have the copy?
It will all go on the website. So have you got access to the website? You can download it from there.
I mean, school website.
School website, yeah.
Yeah, I can check there.
Yeah, Miss Walker will get that on this week for you. And then if you've got any other questions, I'm sure you can ask Mrs. Warburton.
Yep.
Once you've had a look at that.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone else? Oh, who have we got? Matthew?
Yeah, I just have one quick question with regards to the results and such like that. Are we then looking at next year the students being broke up into different classes, or will they all still stay in the same group?
Do you mean in year 2 for the SATs?
Yeah, like after they've done these results, will they be broken up into like higher tier, lower tier, or are they still?
Oh gosh, no. No, it won't change anything. No, they'll still carry on as their one class. Yeah.
Magic.
Yeah.
Okay. Who else have we got? Lara?
Yeah, hi there.
Hello.
Hi, just wanted to ask a quick question, because you did mention they need to be able to read fluently without sounding out the words. So to what extent are they expected to know, like to read fluently? Because sometimes Janelle reads out the words and she tries to like make the sounds. I don't know if you.
Yeah, no, I know it's not that they have to be able to read every single word, but it's the overtly sounding out. So if they're sounding out every single word, then that's not fluency. So they're still at the word recognition stage. So it means that if they come to a word they don't understand and they're using their phonics, that's absolutely fine. But if they're doing that for every word or every other word or very regularly, it means that they're still learning their phonics and they're not quite fluent yet. But fluency, most children have a element of fluency in their reading at the moment, and obviously they're all still working through the book levels and increasing their vocabulary. But yes, she as she gets more fluent, you probably won't even notice it. It'll just suddenly realise that she's not sounding out every single word. But yes, it doesn't have to be practiced fluency. It's just that when she sees the words, she knows them, she recognises them, and she can use her phonics to help her with anything she doesn't know.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Tola?
Hello, sorry.
Hi,
Hello. Hi. I think the area that I definitely appreciate the support on is the maths. And I think it's making sure that, you know, we are supporting what you're teaching them and using the same methodology that you're using in class. Were there any sort of resources or places that, you know, you could point us to that helps us make sure our understanding of it is on point so we can support what you're doing in class with them?
Well, I try and upload things to Tapestry as we go. So at the moment, they're 10s and 1s. You can see we've been using something called Deans. So we've got 10s and 1s, and then they move from using the Deans to drawing them out. So they're all at the stage where they're drawing their Deans out now. so they don't have to have the physical resources, but it is always helpful to have those at home. If you know, but you can make that out of anything. You know, if you've got Lego, you can put 10 pieces of Lego together for your 10, and then use single pieces for your ones. So it's just being creative, really. But if you keep an eye on Tapestry, and every time we do something new, then you can see the method that we're using. This will be particularly important when we start doing addition and subtraction, especially when we're crossing the tens and things like that. So I'll do my best to keep you up to speed with the method that we're using, and so that you can imitate, get your child to show you how they're doing it, and then you can help them by supporting them that way. Is that okay?
Brilliant. Thank you all.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Thank you.
I think just knowing that, yeah, Tapestry is the place.
Yeah, keep an eye on Tapestry. Okay, who else have we got? Matthew, have you got another question?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
No. I think that's it then, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. Okay, so we'll get this popped on the website, or there'll be a link to it. And then if you've got any other questions, you can always ask Mrs. Warburton or send the office an email. But this is kind of just the start. Obviously, we're thinking up till May. It's still quite a long time, but it's just kind of giving you a little heads up so you know what's coming. And then I'm sure Mrs. Warburton will sort of keep giving you little bits and pieces of information as we get closer. But please don't worry about it. It's really important that we keep the children nice and calm, and we want them to be able to do it so they almost don't know it's happening, to be honest. Yeah. So it's very much becomes a normal, doesn't it? For them. And they in my experience, you know, they do like the challenge, and it'll be familiar to them. They'll be doing something that's familiar, and it can be quite an enjoyable experience for many children. So it's nothing to worry about, and they will be very well prepared. There's a lot of information in there, so I can understand if you feel a bit confused. But it's all under control, and we just really appreciate your support. So thank you. I've just seen a couple more hands go up. Okay. Sorry, Hannah, have you got a question?
Yeah, it's sorry, because I joined the meeting late. I don't know, sorry, what's been covered, but it was kind of more general question. How much are we kind of expected to do with them outside of the school hours? Because obviously some kids have had clubs after school, some go to after school club, and sometimes it's just really hard to fit that in. Yeah,
of course. No, we totally understand that. I would just say if you can read with them for 10 minutes a day, that would be perfect. Anything else is a brilliant bonus, but I would say the minimum would be reading with them every day, especially in year 2. Really try and make time for that, you know, in whatever way you can. But obviously, if you can't, that's absolutely fine, and that's the way it is. And we do our best to help them in school. I mean, we only have the resources to read to them with them one-to-one once a week. You know, the rest of the time it's through their writing, or it might be through story time that we're discussing. But for us to hear them read one-to-one with some meaning, it's obviously once a week. So any time they get with you, on top of that, will increase their knowledge, their fluency, their understanding, their comprehension, their writing, and they have to read maths questions as well. So they have to do reading and writing in maths as well, which often throws them as well. So they might be really good at maths and not really interested in reading, but actually we need to get the two together so they can do their maths as well as they would like to do. So yeah, 10 minutes a day reading would be lovely. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mary, did you have a question?
I sure did. So I want to find out how many days the assessments are going to be carried out over.
Well, it's difficult to say at the moment. Well, we can take the whole month if we want to. Wow. So it really depends on where we are when it starts. So that's why we don't like to. It may be that children are really emotional one day, so we'll put it off and we'll wait for another day. It's not going to be set in stone. So but we'll keep you informed. We'll let you know what tests have been done and what the plan is, so you know what's yeah. So nearer the time, we'll let you know.
Super. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Tola, did you have another question?
Sorry, no, I didn't. I think
No,
my
that's
hand
fine.
is just permanently.
Great.
Sorry.
Hi. Okay.
Brilliant, that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. It's really appreciated that you've taken part, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.